Welcome to Business Talk Sister Cock. I'm Becca.
And I'm Ruthie.
And today we are going to be talking about, does networking actually work? So
I always feel the need to make like some ding or some kind of sound. So I was refraining from that.
And then you just started laughing.
And then I laughed.
Okay. So the question is, does networking actually work? And we're going to talk about that a little bit in detail. So to answer that off the bat, the first year of networking is not fruitful in some ways because you're learning about people, business, and problems, all of that kind of stuff. Now, when I say fruitful, what I mean by that is it's not financially fruitful.
It's not going to generate a lot of income for you right off the bat.
It is fruitful in terms of relationship building.
Tell us more about that.
Okay, so when you network with people, and I'm just going to clarify, when we're talking about networking, we're talking about the traditional sense of creating relationships with people, getting to know them and what they do. Now, there's a lot of these new programs out there that people will talk to you about networking schemes and all of this stuff. And some of them are really focused on pyramid schemes. That is not what we are talking about. We are talking about developing quality relationships with other people. Now that we've clarified that, when you're talking to people, where do you find these people, or how do you grow your network of people?
Yeah. So in a digital sense, I'll touch on that, and then Becca can talk about a couple other avenues. But in the digital world, LinkedIn is amazing for this. So what I know Becca has talked about on other episodes and things like that, where they have a whole networking program that you can sign up to basically have a business mentor, and then you get put into this pool, and then basically their algorithm tries to match you with people that they think you would be a good fit with, and then it's your responsibility to reach out to them and whatnot. But LinkedIn is a really good place to kind of make connections. Right now I take a whole bunch of LinkedIn courses, like on LinkedIn Learning. And so if I have a teacher that I think is really good, I go and add them on LinkedIn. And just the other day, it was the coolest thing ever. I've never had this happen before, that I connected with this one guy, and then his assistant messaged me and was like, hey, he has like a certain amount of close connections or something that he can have. I don't remember what it was, but he was like, but thank you so much for reaching out. Like, that really means a lot that you liked his material and everything. Like, let us know if there's anything that you have questions about or whatever. And he's this professor at a different, I don't even remember what school it's at. But anyway, it just I was like, wow, that is so cool that this person that I really look up to, I was able to connect with on LinkedIn. So in a digital sense, LinkedIn is a really good way to build that networking and then be able to kind of start the conversation, not necessarily maintain it, but it's a good place to kind of get a good platform to begin the conversation. So Becca, tell us a little bit more about the actual tangible form of networking as opposed to the digital form.
Yeah, and we can come back to the digital too, because there's a lot of different platforms you can do that on besides LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. But the actual in-person events, which is a little bit hard now with a lot of these safety restrictions and stuff with COVID, but in the past, and I'm assuming it's going to come back, so we're social beings, there's no way we're going to stop meeting in person entirely. In the past, there's a lot of different events like Chamber of Commerce parties, or all these different business entrepreneurship things, and there are lots of opportunities to get to know people. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be an experience where your goal, you're going into it as, I am going to make 3 sales.
This is huge. I love that you just said that, because so I am a big fan of Gary Vee. Becca is also a big fan of Gary Vee. If you ever want to check him out, just know that he does swear. So if that's something that is an issue with you, don't look him up. Problem solved. But he has so much good content, just so just really good stuff. But anyway, one thing that he talks about a lot is going into conversations with people, having no expectation of them. Just no expectations in general. He just talks about that a lot. Not necessarily not having goals, but not going into it like, if I do this for you, you will then do this for me. He always talks about like just giving and then leaving it, you know, and he gave this example of how he helped this one guy get this like multi-million-dollar sale. And then a few years later, he made this, Gary Vee wrote this book and went to him and said, hey, could you buy a couple copies? You know, like, I'm just starting out. And the guy was like, absolutely not. Why would you ask me? And then he was like, I say that not so that it can be like, oh, woe is me. This guy like totally gypped me or whatever. I did all this stuff for him. But to say that I was able to walk away from that situation knowing, yeah, that's okay. And it did not personally offend me because I knew I went and did that for him, having no expectation of him ever returning the favor. And that maybe kind of is a cynical outlook, but honestly, like, it's just like that sacrificial, like, I'm doing this for you with no expectation of that return. And so like, but Becca's talking about going to these networking events, not going like, I'm going to make this amount of money, or I'm going to connect with these people and they better refer this amount of business to me or whatever, but just going to just meet people and get to know them and get to know their stories. So tell us a little bit more about that, Becca.
Yeah. So when you talk with people, and a long time ago, when I was first starting in sales, I was really like, well, how do I do this better? And they kind of talked about like, well, always be open to collaboration and always be like, just talking to people about what they do. And actually, I really didn't even truly learn the heart of that until a little bit later, when I started realizing the genuineness, how to tell the difference between a genuine person and a non-genuine person in a relationship of conversation. Mm-hmm. And part of that is when you go to a networking event, like say you're going to go to a party that's for business people, understanding that you're there to glean information, to learn about what this person does, why they do it, what their problems are. And hearing those things, you're going to start to, especially if you pick one industry, where you're going to start seeing.
What do you mean by problems? Are you talking like, tell me all about your childhood?
No. So yeah. All right. That's a great question. Okay. So let's just pick an industry. I started in a couple different industries, but if you start seeing common themes that people are struggling with or whatever, you're like, tell me about your business. And they start talking, well, this is what I do. And, these different things. And you just ask more questions like, wow, like even a common question right now. So how has COVID like affected your business? Has it at all? And then they start telling you, well, you know, we had to change all these things. And this is really like the hardest part for me. And you're going to find that the things that you thought were going to be the hardest thing is never actually the truth of what they're really struggling with. And I mean, just those kind of conversation starters and getting to know people and what's going on in their business, or even, wow, how'd you start out with this? That's incredible. Have you ever considered doing this? And a lot of times people, like, especially when I see a diversification opportunity or whatever, they'll say, actually, yeah, we thought about that. We totally did, but we just don't have the time for that. Or actually we did that, but it was way too much paperwork. And in the long run, it wasn't meeting our personal family goals. And I just recently talked to somebody, just the cutest business owner. Oh, she's wonderful. She's getting ready to retire. And she was just talking all about, you know, I used to do a lot of this and it was very lucrative, but the reality is that I wanted to spend more time with my family, and this was me working on the road all the time. And we just decided that even though it's a lucrative part of our business, we don't need it to have a quality life. And that to me was really interesting because you just learn so much about people and their value systems and what problems they have. And then as you network, you'll start realizing that other people are facing similar things, or maybe have similar or have solved something that this person is struggling with. And that's where networking is beautiful, because when you find out, like, no way, you do this thing and you're having this problem, you want to know something? I recently talked to somebody who's also experiencing the same problem, and they went through this process to solve that. Have you ever considered it? Mm-hmm. And suddenly you have this aha moment for that person, that you literally did nothing but learn from one person and share some knowledge with another person, or even saying, you know, you guys should really get together. I think that would be a great opportunity for you to learn from one another and create a good relationship.
Mm-hmm. And with that, like, I think when you think about networking, it's a lot of people think of it as like, what can I get out of the situation? What you really have to think about with networking is how can I add value to this person? And like what Becca was saying, like if you're talking with someone who has an issue with their, I don't know, like their SEO or something like that, and you just had a conversation with someone whose main specialty is SEO or like whatever that is, you're like, oh, you should talk with so-and-so. And it's not always like, let me help you with that. Let me do that with you. It's like, let me get you to the person that will help. And one of my favorite things ever, I didn't realize this until recently, is making connection calls, is knowing my friends and knowing their skill set and knowing what their life trajectory is, and then meeting someone and saying like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what this person wants to do with their life. And then I talk with that person and say, hey, would you want to connect with this person? And then I call the person. Okay, so like person A is going to school for like accounting, okay, and then person B needs an accountant, and then like talking with the person A, like, and then going to person B and saying, here's this person A, they're so great, they have all these really cool things, they have a whole list of questions and they would love to talk with you about that, could I give them your information? And then like being that middleman is one of my favorite things ever, because then I just get to hype other people up, get to make fun connections, and I just love that. So I think like coming back to the heart of networking, which is adding value to other people. So tell me about networking, Becca, and is it risky? Like what is the level of risk in network versus reward?
So I think that networking is one of the lowest risk things you can do to create value in your business and get your name out there. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the lowest marketing cost things you can possibly do in a lot of ways, because you're representing yourself. And I will say, yes, it is risky, especially if you have a volatile personality, because then people really get to know who you really are, right? But at the same time, it's if you're doing it right and you're doing the self-reflection and saying, how can I get better and why didn't that go well? And there's been so many opportunities where I have had to go through, okay, why didn't that end well? And when I start reflecting on the conversation I had with them, maybe it's because I had ulterior motives, that I was trying to close a sale, and that was not appropriate. Or, I mean, it was because that was my job, like to do this, and that was the expectation on me from a company. But if you're your own business, you have the choice to create that time and value in the relationship that is not the pressure of being just solely a salesperson. And when you develop those conversations, people will test you. And there's different ways that people are testing you. So first of all, people are testing you to see if you're a genuine person or if you're just trying to sell them something, right? And they want to know what your intentions are. And at the same time, you should be testing other people to know what their intentions are.
How do you do that?
Yeah. So a lot of times, so the best way to start is first by asking questions of someone. When you meet them, whatever, you say, oh, what are you here for? And what is your business? Or asking about, wow, that's really interesting. So how do you do that? Or like, what got you involved in that originally? And this is something that I learned from the History Chicks. Actually, it was Catherine the Great. So the podcast, Ruthie was like, you need to listen to this.
The History Chicks, so good. Love their podcast.
Great podcast, yeah. So within the things that Catherine the Great did is that she was really good at emotional intelligence of asking other people questions.
Yeah. Well, even as like a young girl, like she would just, and that's how she got so many people on her side when she became the queen.
BT Dubs, did you know she overthrew the whole, did a coup? Like, wow. You really have to have good social skills to make a coup happen.
Because all of these like major leaders loved her because she would just sit and ask them question after question, was genuinely interested in what they did. And then they ended up helping her down the road. So like maybe there was ulterior motives, but she was really good at
people love talking about themselves.
So true, yeah.
And ask them questions. Now, in terms, when we're talking about the riskiness and then people testing you, it's really good to listen to the words that people are using because sometimes their intentions are not good. And I would say this is not as common all the time, but it depends on the industry that you're in and what those people are thinking. But the things that I have heard come out of people's mouths that I start realizing, okay, I need to be really good at safeguarding myself from risk is things like, oh, did you come here by yourself? Where are you staying? Those kind of things. For me as a woman, a business owner going to a conference, those are questions that I start realizing, your intentions are not right, and I am not going to be hanging out with you. And so those kind of questions saying, you're literally here to waste my time in terms of being a genuine person of connection. It's not necessarily like waste my time in terms of I'm not going to make any money in a sale. No, it's just you're not a genuine person that's truly interested in me. You're interested in something else that nobody should be here for. And that's something that figuring out those kind of questions is really good. By digging a little further in those conversations, you can end them pretty quickly by saying things like, so tell me about your business. And so what is going on in that? Like, how does that look for you? And go ahead, Ruthie. She's got something she wants to say.
I raised my hand. I think so on that note, like Becca and I are going to do another episode about like boundaries in business and stuff. But I know like for me and for Becca also, we are both women business owners, and I know some people, there is a difference in how women interact. I don't know, not necessarily interact, but like just there's differences that maybe men don't experience as much. So I think like just being able to recognize that verbiage is really important, and being able to recognize like, maybe you're not as emotionally astute or whatever, but like just like being able, oh, wait a second, they just said that. How did that make me feel? What just happened there? And just really being able to kind of set those things up for you so that like, I'm not in a safe situation right now. And then going back to like setting up safety guidelines for yourself with networking. Pay attention to the people, the verbiage that people are using, but then also pay attention to where you're trying to network. Don't ever find yourself alone in a room with somebody else. That's just, it sounds practical, but really being intentional about that. If you're at a conference, stay in a public place. If you're going to meet with someone, just don't try to be like, hey, come to my house. That's just you should draw the line there. Don't do that.
And I will speak to that. There's been experiences where something like that has happened to me, and then I'm like, oh, I think that wasn't a good idea. I should have had someone else with me when I did this or whatever. And it's not necessarily that anything bad has happened, but I've taken the time of self-reflection to be like, in another situation, if I did not know this person very well, this would have been a bad idea. And but the networking piece of it, we're just going to go back to that because we're going to talk about boundaries later. Okay. So when you get to know someone, people are going to test you in terms of your trustworthiness. And that starts, if somebody gives you their business card and you say you're going to follow up with them, you sure better do it. You better be sending that person an email. And if you're saying, yeah, I want to get to know you better, let's collaborate on something or whatever. I had the opportunity to meet somebody one time that at a Christmas party, and we just kind of were there as mentors to other kids and stuff. And I was like, tell me about your business, whatever. And it was just so interesting to me. I was like, hey, we should get together, talk about this on the phone sometime or whatever. And so I took the initiative to make sure that I did follow up with that person. And if it's not something that happens in the near future, because they're just a busy person, you need to push it forward to a date that's agreeable to everybody. And there are some business owners, quite honestly, that are just not going to have the time. And that's okay. Those people, that's when you just send them a quick text or quick email saying, you know what, I just really appreciated getting to know you. If ever you have the time and you want to schedule something, I would totally be open to that in my schedule. And making sure that they have the space to reach out to you is important in that. But people are testing you to see if you're going to follow through. If you ever ask someone advice on something, or ask for a book recommendation, you should not be going back to that person and talking to them unless you've done what they told you to do. And I feel really strongly about that because it really proves that you're a valuable person, that you honor what you said you were going to commit to.
Not necessarily valuable person, but the relationship is going to prove valuable because you guys are both following up on what you said you were going to do.
Yeah. So we could talk about this all day. We're gonna talk about one more thing in this, and Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. This is our gawk we're gonna transition to right now. But back in the day when I was in 4-H as a young child, okay, we just here to put in a plug for 4-H. We love them.
There's so many practical things you can learn from 4-H, like just life skills. Man, good stuff right there.
So back in the day, I was a 4-H ambassador, and because we were representing their brand, they took the time to give us an etiquette class. And I love this. So first of all, like all of these high school students, you put them in a room with an etiquette teacher, and obviously there's some immature people that are not taking it seriously, which was like an interesting thing in general. And I'm like, no, this person is like actually a legitimate coach on etiquette. I'm going to pay attention. Well, so we were having a dinner and they were talking about simple things that like ladies and gentlemen should do and all this stuff. Literally dropped a grape down my shirt. And I was like, she gave us a whole manual, and I'm like flipping through this manual as fast as I can, what to do when dropping food down your shirt. I'm like, I have no idea. And the manual literally had nothing to do with that.
What a garbage class. Useless.
So then I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do what it says to or in terms of like how to leave the table properly. So I like put my napkin. I'm pretty sure you have to put your napkin to the side on your chair. You put it on your chair, because if you put it on your plate, it means that you're not coming back, and the server needs to take your food or your plate away. Anyways, so I put it on my chair, and I got up and excused myself to go to the bathroom, and then dealt with the food down my shirt. But it was just like, oh my word, like classic, like I'm trying to be proper, and suddenly I have this problem.
And there was no practical assistance in the manual.
Talk about not foolproof.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. Join us again next week for our next episode, when we will talk about business boundaries and kind of what that looked like in our lives. And
have a great week.